Jordan,
Hello.
lovely to have you here. We've got quite a lot in common. Like you're the unexpected new face into the men and boys sector. And I was really grateful you gave me the time to understand your journey and what you found interesting or difficult or shocking. So tell me, when did this journey begin? How did you arrive in this seat?
Well, this is an interesting seat, isn't it? This is like you have created, like, I think quite I don't know what the air is around the TinMen as a space, but like I know that when I saw that blog for the first time, I was excited to your blog, sorry, for the first time, I was excited to see like a centralized area of just a focus on men and boys issues. And then I was intrigued to see, which I'm sure you've spoken about with many guests, you know, the back and forth, like the conversations, the comments underneath. At the time, I think a friend of mine in Africa had also followed your work, and that was interesting. And but that was I mentioned that because that was quite early on, actually, in my, I guess, conscious desire to be present when discussing men and boys. In truth, you know, I have my own experience as a man, a young man becoming a man, which centers around heartbreak, something I wrote a book about, and avoidance, drugs, heartbreak and dogs, if you're interested.
Let's jump in there. You said heartbreak, and one of the things I was talking about earlier was how men seem to have their hearts broken easier than women, or at least to take longer to recover from breakups. Do you think that's true? And why is that?
Easier than women's interesting.
It takes men longer to get over a breakup on average.
I've heard that, yeah. And I would be interested to know how to measure that, but I would think if that is to be true, I would guess it's because we aren't accustomed to being in connection with our bodies and understanding how we feel. Whereas for whatever reason, I'd say, again, I'm generalizing, but there's almost there's a natural and a societal predisposition for women to understand how they feel and just engaging with pain, to be honest. I think women, for a lot of women, obviously I can't speak on behalf of women, but from what I know, women deal with pain in many different ways. Constantly, whether that's having a period or whether it's even like wearing heels. There's a certain element of pain that's women are expected to sometimes experience sexually. You know, it's like childbirth, of course, obviously that's later on in life, but I mean just that understanding of just like pain and then emotional pain with periods. What I find so fascinating is that women just get on with it as well. They can be in work or school or whatever, and they're expected to just carry on with these kind of complete hormonal imbalances. So I think for men, well, for me personally, I can speak from my experience, when I was confronted with emotional pain of that depth, I had like no guidelines of how to deal with that shit. And I didn't know, the most important thing was I didn't know that it would go. That was the most memorable part, and maybe a big motivation for writing the book, is I had suicidal ideation because I didn't know that pain would stop. Whereas if I'd had a more everyday relationship with pain, perhaps I wouldn't go into things, you know. So maybe that's why the heartbreak thing can feel overwhelming for some boys and men, because when else in our lives up until that point are we engaging with that? Or maybe we've only felt it really young and didn't know how to process that experience.
Have you heard of the word Alexithemia?
No, what's that?
It's a great word. It basically means without words for emotions. So it basically describes someone that's unable to express the way they're feeling through words.
Yeah.
And it comes from a psychologist called Levant. And
cool.
He found that men have higher levels of Alexithemia. So men struggle more than women to express their feelings through words.
That makes sense.
But he also found that boys at a young age are more emotionally expressive than girls. Yeah. But something changes between being a boy and being a man, where they struggle to talk about the words.
We were rejected for showing the emotion.
Yeah. Well, he said that they're taught by parents, peers, friends, school teachers,
it's really subtle.
Coaches.
Yeah. Well, sports has a kind of old school approach to it of sucking it up, and there is a balance in between the two, by the way. Like, I'm not like, I don't think going as a parent, I wouldn't be completely, you know, validate all spectrums of emotion. There are spaces where, you know, it is important for us to understand that we can pick ourselves up, but to reject the processing of emotions entirely is, I don't agree with.
Well, I don't express my emotions as much as I imagine most women, but that doesn't mean I don't feel emotions.
Yeah, of course.
I think I feel as much as anyone else. And the important thing is I'm feeling the emotions and I'm acknowledging them in my own head, but I'm not necessarily
Well, it's interesting you say you're acknowledging them in your head because, and this is why I'm so passionate about, what would it be, emotional literacy or something? Or like if we're going to talk about, let's say the single issue is how do we get men to process heartbreak in a healthier way? Let's say that's the issue. My thing, I learnt how to feel. I was taught it. Do you know what I mean?
That?
I was taught it through therapy, through an emotional trauma retreat led by a woman called Donna Lancaster. I've done a Band of Brothers retreat, which is this great organization headed up by a guy called Conroy. They specifically try and rehabilitate boys who have maybe gone and served a bit of time or you know, struggled integrating into society. But I was allowed to do it because they were aware of my interest in the space. I had one man argue that no, emotion is intrinsic. You learn how to feel from engaging with other people, and I disagree. I really don't think that. I think it's a skill set, just as much as anything else would be. You know, yeah, sure, I could give you a pen right now and you could draw something. If you wanted to become a good artist, you'd probably need some guidance. You know, yes, you could probably get slapped in the face and feel angry, but if I said to you, you know, why do you think you're feeling anxious in this social environment and why are you drinking so much to cope with it? I'm trying to create a process between the mind and body which can empower someone to make a healthier decision consciously. And that's based off of them asking themselves the question, why do I feel anxious? What are you covering up? Are you sad to be in this environment? Are you angry to be in this, you know, are you... those are the questions I think a person can ask, and once we ask ourselves that more and more, our emotional IQ, I think, heightens, and then we're more able to engage with things based off how we feel rather than how we think, you know. And I think the feeling actually informs the thinking, whereas I'm not sure the thinking can really inform the feeling.
Beautifully put. Okay. What I hear is that I like to hear you understand things like anxiety and what's making someone anxious. I mean, no one really feels an emotion for no reason.
Exactly.
One of the emotions that everyone talks about in the context of men is anger. And that's the same, if not more so. No one feels anger for no reason.
Yeah.
There's often something behind anger, another emotion like fear, for example.
100%.
But what do you think is behind anger, especially men who are angry?
Well, this is like what my book is about. It's so fascinating. Like for me, I talk a lot about anger because my therapist, who, you know, for the sake of intrigue, is a woman, and she, from the very beginning, was very clear that she believes society, especially British society, has a very complex relationship with anger. We see it as a sign of a loss of control, of weakness. Of some people say, I don't get angry about things. I think what we have done is conflate anger and rage. Rage, from what I understand and what I believe, is basically toxic anger, which is because we haven't known how to express it healthily at the time, it builds up and builds up and then explodes. So my book, it follows my journey, which is somebody who was struggling with addiction, ultimately to self-destruction, but it found its way through cocaine or alcohol or whatever, kept destroying my intimate relationships, did a lot of work on myself, realized that the core of much of this abuse was internalized anger. I could track back moments where I went on binges, where ultimately all I'd done is not told someone to fuck off, and I hadn't told them. You know what I mean? I hadn't said to them, no, I don't want that. Or I'd said yes when I meant no. And instead of like that little healthy expression of anger, which is a boundary ultimately, I turned it in on myself and then ended up hurting them anyway. So there's no point, you know? And so I believe that the root of my addiction was internalized anger. And since I've worked at being more engaged in my anger in a healthy way, which I also think has brought me in while we were talking about, before we started recording, what is this movement called of male advocacy? Well, a big part of me being in touch with that healthy anger felt like an alignment with my masculine energy. And it's only provided me with a much more harmonious life, you know?
So what do you call this movement? I'm always struggling. I mean, I work in the creative industry. I'm quite good at naming things, and I've been trying to name the space for years.
Yeah.
Men's rights advocacy and men's rights activism are off the table because
they've been fucked.
Men and boys issues. Men and boys have too many words.
Yeah.
I like egalitarianism.
Yeah.
Because that's just equality for everyone.
Well, that's what feminism would argue it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a whole podcast in that on its own. But I would say egalitarianism gave birth to feminism.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, of course. It's tough, isn't it? focusing specifically on issues that affect men and boys. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we could find like a cool acronym. I mean,
you're the guy to do it.
Yeah.
Lyricist.
Well, the natural thing I would do is, like I said, I would just call it masculism, because feminism, masculism, and the idea is that someone can have an appreciation for both, and ultimately that would be what brings them balance. But I don't know.
I've just thought about it as men's health. I think everything I post about, everything from like sexual violence in prison to fathers losing children to, you know, addiction.
I think
everything has an impact on men's health. So really, they're all men's health issues.
Yeah, they're men's health issues for sure. I think what's interesting is, firstly, as I'm sure we say a lot on our WhatsApps, whatever, you know, gender ultimately becomes quite reductive in a lot of these conversations, because there's way more things that connect people in society, where that doesn't even account for class or race or culture. But one thing I do like about feminism, which is cool, is the revision. I find it interesting that there's like first, second, third, fourth wave. Something about that I find interesting. I want to be in a space where it's our responsibility to interrogate and critique the male experience, the experience you can have in a male body, and have different variations, people challenging each other. Like, that's cool. So that, I mean, maybe I'm trying to imitate by saying masculism, first wave masculism, like, and then you have like the second wave masculists against with the future fourth wave. You know what I mean? Like I found that, I don't know if it's good or bad, but I found that interesting to observe in feminism, when I've literally seen debates. Like, there are feminists that were once considered heroes are now considered like outdated and regressive.
Or terrorists. Some people consider the suffragettes to be terrorists, and it's
well, the suffragettes is a little bit more complex, because that does bring class into the conversation quite extensively, but
quite middle to upper class.
Yeah, we know the whole situation that no one of the working class could vote at that time. But but yeah. Anyway, so I just find that interesting that there's some kind of catalogue of like different eras of something. So if we could find a way of doing that, I think that's cool.
But I've also learning from feminism, and there's obviously different waves, but there's different branches within each wave.
Yeah,
like you have like the radical, the trans excluding, the liberal.
Oh yeah, TERFs, yeah.
Like there's so many different types of. There's the lesbian separatist feminists. There's so many different.
I think there's like MGTOW or whatever. We have like going their own way.
The MGTOWs and the lesbian separatist feminist, they should get together.
Yeah, just sit across the room from each other.
Like, they both hate the other. They're both living in their own separate ones. Just that'd be a great TV show.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the name is, but I do know that like the need for focus on protecting the like sanctity and well-being of, or actually all children, but boys do seem to crop up a lot as something that people are concerned about, or if not boys, then the consequence of ignoring boys, which is, you know, troubled men who can definitely cause a lot of harm to men and women.
Well, ultimately, yeah, I totally agree. If we don't deal with these issues in childhood, particularly with boys, they're going to grow up into men, and they're more likely to hurt others, hurt women, hurt men, or obviously hurt themselves.
Yeah.
And that's obviously the solution. Like, try to go as upstream as possible.
Yeah.
And give boys the safest upbringing possible.
Well, this is the thing is so just to finish your first question, actually, which I forgot to finish answering, was that once I'd written this book and I put this book out, I thought, well, I'm obviously going to be asked questions about men and boys. So let me do some research on men and boys, so I feel better equipped to be able to talk about the state of things. Because prior to that, I'd already been going to a lot of feminist festivals, because I wrote an article for The Guardian about masculinity back in 2017. And I did a bunch of reading and was like, oh, I was just a little bit more concerned than I was expecting. At the same time, literally at the same time, you had this explosion of like Tate. And suddenly I felt like more of a duty, actually, just to, again, I don't think my way of life is like gospel. I don't think I'm like this fucking messiah. But I do think that there's a necessity to have a diverse view of what men can be publicly, especially when the most popular men, well, firstly, I believe most of them are scamming boys, but like outside of that, they're, I think, falsely advertising a harmonious life, which it doesn't help anybody. So, and the more I've gone into it, the more emboldened I've become, because like things in culture shift, and I go, no, see, this is why it's important. Like, for example, when I start talking about emotion, a lot of men will switch off, because it's like, it's a luxury for me to even talk about emotion. Like, mate, I'm trying to pay my rent.
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to pay my rent. I'm working dumb hours a week. What the fuck are you talking to me about? Like, like feeling good in myself. You know, I want to get home. I want to fucking watch whatever the fuck I want. I want to eat what I want. And then when I do get my check, don't fucking tell me how to spend my money. You know what I mean? That's the vibe I get, right? But then you do like 2-hour deep dive into the future of AI, and people are suggesting that all jobs will be replaced in 10 years. So I'm saying, well, is it still a luxury that I'm talking to you about the importance of feeling? You know, I really don't think that my desire for men to be at peace with their bodies and understand how to feel and feel connected to the world around them, I don't think it's a luxury. I think it's a survival. Like, I think it's actually preparing men for the next wave of humanity, which is returning to a state I think we once used to have before life became profit and money.
There's a great author called Tom Lutz who wrote a whole book about tears and men's expression of pain particularly. And he writes, like, historically, a man crying was seen as like peak masculinity.
Yeah, peak.
It's like, it's written in like samurai code. It's seen in like various different battles in like Greek history. And then the Industrial Revolution came along. And he said it all changed. And he just said, you can't be crying when you're operating machinery that can rip your arm off and kill. And I guess that's only continued to keep going. Like, men don't cry because they're not afforded the space to cry.
Also, the psychological separation between heterosexuality and homosexuality, I think, did a lot of damage, especially when it was considered a sin to be. Before, it was like an act, you know, like you did a gay act, but you weren't gay.
Yeah.
And now, when there's like straight and gay, then people are performing straightness.
But it's an interesting intersectional conversation around the experiences of gay men, because gay men have a very different experience to gay women.
In what sense do you think their experience is different?
Well, I mean, gay men were rounded up and castrated in the UK and sent to hard labour, and gay women weren't. If you grew up in Germany during the Nazi period, you were given a pink triangle if you're a gay man, and you were sent to a concentration camp.
Yeah, right.
Lesbianism wasn't condoned, but they weren't. The Nazis didn't go after them in the same way.
Yeah.
And I feel like obviously in the Bible, it's male homosexuality that's abomination. So I mean, neither of us are really qualified to speak about it.
I'm around a lot of gay guys.
Yeah.
And I hear the conversations a lot. It's so wild. I really struggle to understand the concept of homophobia. I don't struggle to understand it. I struggle to be at peace with like now. When you talk about tears, a band of brothers, there was this one activity where we all stood in a circle, everyone there, so there's probably about 14 people. And Conroy would lead this, and he would say, step forward if you've had your heart broken. And then it'd be step forward if you've lost a pet. Step forward if you've lost someone to suicide. And bro, like, I had already done an emotional trauma retreat at this point, so a lot of the work I was more interested in how other people were engaging, other men were engaging with it, because there was only men on this, whereas the other one I'd done, there was like 12 women and 2 guys. And it just really it landed on for me that like someone I might have even judged. Do you know what I mean? Someone I might have judged from, I don't know, what they're wearing or how they were with me or their refusal to engage in certain things. Then he would say, step forward if you've lost a parent. And they would step forward, and I'd be like, I don't even fucking know this person. Or we'd both step forward step forward if you've lost someone to suicide. We'd both step, and now we're connected by grief, regardless of what views we share. And I just found myself sobbing in this circle, because I just was like, felt so like, it was this thing of this circle of men. I was intrinsically tied to them, because all of us have experienced loss, all of us. And that is what connects the world, is our relationship with grief. That's why it's so important to feel it, because it's feel it and express it and show it, because that's how you form bonds, you know?
I've seen that exact same experiment done in American prisons. Exact same, like a bunch of men in a prison yard. Step forward if you've been abused as a child. Step forward if you were neglected. Step forward if you were never told you were loved by a parent.
Boom.
And they're all both figuratively and literally close together.
Yeah. So mate, it's really powerful, and that's the circle of men. I'm sure it works the same way for women too, but that feeling, I was like, wow, maybe I am tapping into this kind of like ancient ritual of just like men literally facing each other and then confronting their grief. Like that's fucking like, it was hardcore. But that's why, again, I feel so passionate about reminding people that we have this duty to ourselves to feel connected to something greater than like fucking net profit.
I mean, what I'm trying to get at is that those men in a prison yard, people would see those as the angry men, the violent men, the men that we don't want to see anymore.
Oh, anger, that's what we're talking about, yes.
But no one wants to look behind that man in the prison yard to understand what shaped those behaviours. That's where it becomes a difficult thing to see that man who's done something horrible, to put him in prison, to see him as a victim in his own right as well. How do we do that? How do we see that man as two people simultaneously?
Well, anger, again, is a healthy core emotion. Rage isn't. So this is what I mean. If we can give people the information, dare I say, teach people how to feel, then they can probably make healthier choices. At the moment, it's an impossible situation because people are hurt by rage. If someone's gone and literally ended someone's life or changed someone's life irreparably, yeah, it's going to be tough to turn around and be like, yeah, but they were abused as a child.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you're a fucking adult and you've made that choice. But this is why I urge people to watch the work. I'm not even the best equipped to be able to answer that question. But the work is an incredible documentary, and what it conclusively proves, I believe, is why it's so important to feel this shit. Because you talk about a common expression within men being rage. In this documentary, I'll give you a brief setup. It's a high security prison. So these guys have done some fucking bad shit, these men. And it is run and mentored by some elders, and begins with inner child work, which is really hard. And you have to watch the documentary to see how it's done. And then ultimately you're in a circle again, and these inmates will end up triggering each other. So someone might say something like, why do you think, what happened to you that you remember? And one guy could be like, my best friend told everybody about this sexual experience I had when I was a kid, and I was really embarrassed and I felt really devastated. That's the admission, which, by the way, is crazy or in itself. This person now ended up in a high security prison, and he thinks that like one of the first root causes was having his heart broken by his best friend from just betrayal, right? Anyway, someone else might be like, fuck you, you're a wimp or whatever. And then they're allowed to engage like that. But if it stands up into a violent confrontation, the entire group have to hold this guy. Right, and some of these guys are big, but it feels like quite a masculine energy. And they hold these men, and they scream and they shout, and they're trying to fight everyone or whatever, and then eventually they just break. And once they break and cry, again, people hate me saying this, but I really believe it's true, they're in some sense of alignment again. Because they've got through the defense mechanisms and the whatever, and the rage, not anger, the rage. And then at the bottom of it is just devastation, heartbreak, frustration, And then they let go, and the person just cry and lets it out, and then everyone goes, yeah, man, like this is it. And you sit and you hold them, and it's like these are big men that everybody would think is like I don't know what stories we're told about what makes a man, or rough, big, violent, scary, but it's that. But they're fucking devastated about something, and for a decade, this 2 decades, these people have been projecting that devastation onto the world, because there's no space to have this prior to it becoming too late. You know what I mean? That's why I care about this. But I would recommend everybody watch the work. It's way more. It's an incredible documentary. I think just really gets to the core of how difficult it is being a man who's been, raised in a society that abuses them with the false promise of it being for them, and then, ending up ruining their lives, being incarcerated, being in a fucking room for. Many of these men are in prison for the rest of their lives. Do
you know what percentage of the American prison population have a adverse childhood experience?
Probably like 80%.
It's like 97%.
Yeah, of course.
It's like all of them, basically.
Yeah.
I went to a lecture on tears once from a tears expert, and they do exist. And he said there's no physical, biological benefit to crying. It doesn't do anything, and humans are the only ones to actually cry. But the benefit tears have, and the reason why we do it, evolutionary, is because it signals pain. And it's basically someone reaching out for help from their fellow human.
That could be true. I feel like there's new research on tears. Then.
Well, I'm not.
I think they found.
I'm not fully read up on the latest tears.
I think they might have discovered like cortisol in tears, which would mean that it's actually it's actually alleviating your body of stress.
Wow,
you'd have to check me on that.
I'm
not the one with a laptop.
We'll put a pin in it. Yeah. But what he was saying was that crying is a signal to
it's a signal,
help.
Yeah.
So within that context, I also want to know, why would a man learn never to cry? Like, what has he learned about help or not getting help that's taught him never to cry or not to cry?
What do you mean?
Like, why would someone not cry if crying is a call for help, and someone has learned crying has no benefit to them? Does that not signal that they've learned that no one's there to help them?
Yeah.
And do you think, like, if a man doesn't cry, that's more about society not seeing him as the boy looking for help?
Yeah, I mean, I really, really think everybody should cry. I really think it should be a normal thing. You know, that idea that it's a sign of weakness is perpetuated for all types of reasons. I don't know, man. I feel like the version of like pop stoicism that we have nowadays, where people think it's just like being impenetrable, is some kind of status symbol. I just don't think. Like, I saw Piers Morgan the other day on This Morning say that he's not cried in 12 years because, you know, I just get on with it. And I'm like, yes, I would never want to be like you, ever. Because if you can't feel that, you can't feel the opposite. So I'm sure he just swans through life not feeling anything.
I agree. That's something I get frustrated at. Everyone talks about men don't express pain, but I feel like men don't express lots of emotion. They don't express joy, happiness, or love, or so many. And it's like the whole colour palette is dampened down for men's emotions, not just the crying bit. But I feel like men go through like a grayscale version of life often.
Yeah. I really believe that, you know, people ask me when I talk about masculinity and femininity as these abstract terms, what do I mean? For me, this is for me, the heart opening and closing. A feminine energy is an open heart, and a masculine energy is a protected heart, right? I think extremes of both are damaging. If you just leave your heart open the whole time, of course, it's going to end up dominating your life. You're going to need to control situations because you're too exposed. If you protect your heart and never open it, then of course you shut yourself off to so many experiences. Why I believe that masculine and feminine energy can be held and expressed by any human being is because that's the practice. We have to learn when to open and close. So I think there are some people right now who feel a lot, myself included, and it's our responsibility to, at some point, hold a boundary. There's only so much we can give emotionally, you know? So I'd say that would be like a getting in line with the masculine a little bit more. So I think often we'll get our hearts hurt, and I see this a lot with women, actually. This is actually something I've noticed more recently with women, is their response to like a devastation is to close their hearts. And a lot of the time I understand why, but it doesn't breed connection. Like, I think the bravest thing any human being can do is get their heart broken and then open it again, love again after. And I think a lot of men get their hearts broken at a time when they can't even conceive of it, and all they know is protection. So of course they're engaging in all this heady stuff, logic-based stuff, because they don't think that there's any benefit to opening their hearts, because it's not numbers on the screen. But I'm like, if I say to a man, I feel more secure in my life than ever because I'm in love with someone, I don't know if they'll believe me. I can't show them a number to say that. But I do know that my life has improved massively since being able to cultivate close, emotionally bound relationships.
This is like where I find myself separated from the wider conversation. There's a lot of people that want to talk about masculinity, what is it, and the various different versions of it, both good and bad. And I'm just more interested in trying to make sure men, particularly boys, are protected and have the right policy in place, and whatever resultant masculinity comes out of that, I hope is good. So I'm less interested in the masculinity side and more interested in the bullied boy. I don't care about the toxic side. I want to know. Let's keep.
I don't think masculinity is toxic, though.
Well, nor do I. But in terms, I'm talking about the dysfunctional performances of masculinity.
I think the issue with that, though, is it's like it's really hard to engage in that conversation after somebody has projected that into the world. That is the difficulty. Like, for example, I said that about Tate. What I said about Tate was I watched him talk about his upbringing, and it's fucking heartbreaking. You know, like I said, if I'm to remove myself from the implications of his actions, just viewing him, like you're saying, as a man that was once a boy, he is putting on this performance that he's really happy about how he was treated. It sounds fucking horrendous, like genuinely horrible, like what some of the stuff his dad did, or the way he treated his mum, all this kind of stuff. And, you know, people are like, yeah, well, I know loads of people have done that and they haven't ended up sex trafficking or you know, running massive scams or whatever, which is true. My takeaway from that isn't to be like, and so Andrew Tate is fine. No, it's saying like, if we can hold this piece of information, we can utilize that to prevent another Tate. You know what I'm saying?
I'm not trying to alleviate. I'm not trying to justify any sort of crime or violent acts. I'm purely trying to understand it. It's not about alleviating response. There's no justifying violence at all, really. But I'm purely trying to understand, to stop other boys following down that path.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
like,
100%.
Yeah, fuck Andrew Tate. But I would like there not to be another Andrew Tate in 10 or 20 years' time.
Yeah, hurt people, that thing. I know it's like an overused phrase, but it's true. It really is true. And people can argue that hurt people also don't hurt people, but they might hurt themselves.
I mean, in London, obviously, there's a gang problem. This is something that I know you speak about quite a bit. But I'm sure if we went and found one of these boys in a gang and we followed him home and we went to see what he'd gone through and the household he came from, he's often from fatherless homes, often broken families, often recruited himself, and he is also a victim. So,
but the thing is, we do understand it. But we do understand it conceptually. It's just that I think we're overwhelmed with so many extremities of news stories that it's difficult to pull back. Because if you were to make the same argument on a rescue dog to a person, they wouldn't dispute it. You know what I mean? Because there isn't, for some reason, it's not as loaded. But like more time, you can meet a rescue dog, and for the first 3 hours, it'll be trying to bite your hand off.
Yeah.
And then all you have to do is consistently show that dog love, and it will soften.
But how do we do that when we're taught so much of the language and rhetoric I see around men, especially the violent men, deprives them further?
This is what I mean. Emotional literacy. I did one thing on Being a Man Festival back in the day when it was still running at South Bank. I was put into a mentor session where I spoke to a young boy at school, and we spoke for a while, and he was talking about how he was bullied. And once I felt like I knew him well enough, within that time frame, I tried to just softball him a little bit when I said, like, have you ever wondered why the bully is mean? And he went, well, what do you mean? And I said, I don't know, like, what's it like? Do you know anything about his parents, whatever? And we had this kind of casual conversation, and it transpired. Of course, the boy was like, yeah, and started describing this really shit. You know, the kid was hanging around for ages after school, clearly didn't have anywhere to go home to, or would come in late, or come in with like something. And then I finished it by being like, so do you think is it you? Do you think he's bullied? Is it about you or is it about him? And the kid was like, no, actually, I think it's about him.
Yeah.
And I'm not excusing the bully. I'm not excusing the bully, and I don't think this kid should be bullied. But all that happened in that moment is the kid doesn't have to go into that school and think he's being bullied because of him. It's not a personal attack on him. The kid can say it is, but he'll be emboldened with knowledge of like, okay, I it should stop, but at least I don't have to go away and reframe my self-worth because of what this person's saying. Which is incredibly hard to do, by the way. It's almost impossible. I mean, I look at comments, mean comments about me, and I'll just be like, "Oh my god, is this true?" but then you nearly every time if you respond to one of these comments, people just shift, they change. The initial expression of frustration is, like you say, it's based in disconnection or isolation or whatever it is. Yeah, I really believe that.
You mentioned the boys hanging around outside school, the bully. That is. One of the things we've seen in London is we've lost 30% of our youth clubs.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I heard the previous guest talk about this. It's just like inexcusable.
I mean, I also heard that for every £1 we save by closing a youth club, we lose £3 in terms of education. But
yeah.
So what do you think when you see these youth clubs closing down?
I just think it's disgraceful. I mean, this is more like an existential spiral for me. I really struggle to conceive of the logic of a government deciding that the best way to balance books is to squeeze opportunity away from young people, and also create this idea that creativity is, again, a luxury. You know, you had like in government 6-7 years ago, fucking Michael Gove or some wanker like that, talking about how, you know, we have fake degrees, or like people are wasting their time in education. Like for what? Like what do you think life's about? Like, this is genuinely what I get my head around. What do you think makes maths, science, and English more important than somebody deciding to study the history of art or music production? Like you're talking, these people are talking as if they think they understand what life's about. Like, what does it mean? Like you go home, you put on a radio. What are you doing with your spare time? You're entertaining yourself with other people's creative energy. You might not be creative, but it defines everything. The fact that people would come in and be like, well, it's beautiful, but it doesn't make profit, or it's beautiful, but it seems like a waste of time. You know, and then you deal with the consequence of it. Oh, there's more stabbings in London. Oh, wow, what a surprise. You've removed the opportunity for a man that's not immediately tied to someone's family, or a woman, to step in and encourage a child to feel seen. You know, for a lot of these kids, home might not be the vibe. After school club was massive to me. Brighton Youth Centre was huge to me. Rizzle Kicks wouldn't exist without Audio Active. That's why I'm the patron of that charity. Like, I'm not being hyperbolic. If I hadn't had a man in a fucking vegetarian burger restaurant tell me that he was running a hip hop class or like session, and I met all these boys who were fucking pissed about life and their form tutors, whatever we were annoyed about that week, and we put it into rhyme form, I don't know if I would be here. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a debate. It pisses me off. It actually pisses me off because, like you say, it costs so much more. And I don't understand where it's going. People seem to, I can't understand, who are these people defending? Like, what is it like? Oh, but we need to be viable on the global economic stage. At what cost? Like this, like the mental stability of like 80% of the population. I honestly don't get it. That's what I mean about existential spiral. I really struggle. We need that space. We need third, fourth spaces. We need to go outside, be around people from different cultures, from different genders. And just like, you said it, your previous guest said it, which was such a beautiful way of doing it. Like, if you enjoy an activity with another person, if you have a shared experience, and it just transcends all this nonsense. I really don't understand the youth clubs thing. I mean, youth clubs, even live music venues. Britain specifically is like renowned for our creative output. Why would you be trying to make that more difficult? Or make that something only enjoyed by the ruling class?
Do you think there's something that ties gang violence to fatherless homes without that sort of male role model?
Fatherless, yeah. Lack of a father is a massive thing, a massive issue. But that's my point, though, is it's like absence of fathers would be less of an issue if there was a presence of male mentors available to boys. For a lot of boys, that can be their football coach, or it could be their, particularly cool teacher, or like I said, like after school clubs, whatever it is something, isn't it? I'm not an individualist. I don't believe in the idea of like locking down your fort and, focusing on your heirs. Every adult is responsible for every child within reason. And like, I love stepdads who step up and are in a relationship with somebody who has a child, and that child accepts them as a father, or the reverse. Like, it's fucking beautiful, that shit, man. Like, that really like makes my fucking day. When I hear about somebody stepping up for a child that's not theirs, like, what is there anything more honorable than that? That's real honor. You know what I'm saying? And just to be clear, I'm very, very pro father. I'm also pro, gay couples having kids for sure. But I think even gay couples would acknowledge that it's important to have a diverse, like, network of friends and people to pick up the child and tell them stories. And, especially if you do have a boy, they want to see a bigger version of them.
I know, totally agree. But I'm just very aware of people probably listening now feeling like we are demonizing single mothers, saying that, oh yeah, you're causing this harm by having no father at home. How do we simultaneously talk?
How's that demonizing them?
Well, I don't think it is. I guess what I'm trying to say is, how do we highlight the importance of fathers, or any male role model, whilst not causing needless offence to people that might be upset by us talking about the importance of fathers? And, well, what about mothers, and what about women?
Well, again, my take on this is a lot more radical, and the issue for me is the isolation of this individualist fort. Like, no person should have to stay in an abusive relationship. Let's say, for example, nobody, man or woman, should have to stay in that for the sake of a child. A lot of people do. A lot, for clarity, a lot of people do. Having platonic friendships with people of the opposite sex, brilliant idea. We should be encouraging that from the beginning. People stepping into relationships with people who already have children, fantastic. Like, these are things that can counter the immediate effects of a broken home, So I'm just saying, ideally, we wouldn't have any broken homes, but if there are ways, I think, to still, I mean, listen, my dad was around. My mum raised me pretty much on her own, and I turned out all right. Bit of drug addiction, but it's all good. So I'm not dismissing the possibility of it happening, but my mum had a network of people around me who would step up. I have an Uncle Ian, I've got my mate's dad, I've got whatever, like, had a lot of people who would, at points, hold me, look after me. And that's important. I think that might be why I've been able to pull myself out of it. Listen, I've been in dark places, but I've pulled myself out of it.
Obviously, we live in like the real world, and like, it's easy to be like, oh well, all families should stay together, but ultimately they don't, and they not always should. So I think you're totally right, where it doesn't have to be a father. It can be any sort of role model for boys.
But also, we don't have any, we're not taught how to be in relationships either.
Well, what do you mean by that?
Like, I learned how to be in a relationship. I was taught. I went to a relationship course that was part of this emotional trauma retreat, and I was told about various elements of being in a relationship that I hadn't really thought about in my head. The fact that, you know, people end up often having like an opposing force within a relationship, maximizers and minimizers. Some people like to deal with things confrontationally. Some people like to sit and review. These are all these things that I learned meant that if I go into a situation that would have blown up, I can deal with it more healthily. We don't get taught that. And yet every single human being on the planet has to have an intimate relationship, and no one is guided in it unless they look for it in themselves. I think that's weird.
Well, one of the things I obviously talk about is male suicide. One of the big causes of that is relationship breakdown.
Right.
I think it's like you're 8 times more likely to attempt suicide when your relationship breaks down
Yeah.
as a man.
Yeah.
You mentioned your relationship obviously put you in a similar place.
Yeah.
I know you talk about the course that you went on.
Yeah.
But sadly, a lot of people
No, they can't do it.
Can't do that.
I know.
So someone that's at home, like literally as you described them, like working 9 to 5, they're breaking up with their girlfriend. What do they do?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out. You know, I guess the solution there is making something accessible, easy to understand.
I'd love to see you do like a syllabus for 1 year to take over the education system.
Heartbreak high.
Get rid of all of like algebra and bring in like emotional resiliency.
But again, then we can get a bit conspiratorial. Are people in power incentivized for people to understand how they feel? Because that is also a big backbone of hyper-consumerism. It's based on people feeling inadequate. Freedom is the absence of want, right? So like if you create a society of people who realize they don't need or want things, how do you monetize them?
These are all really important conversations to have, but I also recognize they are sort of the easier conversations to have. I mean, everyone cares for our boys. Everyone wants to talk about men's mental health now, but there's a set of issues within whatever we're going to call this masculinism that are extremely contentious. You mentioned domestic violence. I know we've talked about this online and offline. The latest data finds that 41% of domestic violence victims in England and Wales are men.
Yeah.
51% of people living in abusive relationships currently are men. How do we take that data and make it palatable to people? Because obviously people will get outraged over hearing stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're a master at making things accessible.
Yeah.
And I genuinely want to know how do we have these conversations about difficult subjects, about abused men that are palatable, but at the same time don't, round off the corners and diminish male victims?
Yeah, I don't have an answer yet. I'm working on it. What's tough is I can't decide what's good or bad for women, right? But I do have discussions with a lot of women. As you know, I'm like a big fan of many feminists. And I think one thing I find interesting as a discussion point is this separation from women and violence, a woman's capacity for violence. So I, at some point, would love to kind of enter into the conversation. If we talk about the effect that hitting children has on people's development, I think it would be incredibly intellectually dishonest for somebody to claim that the only people who hit children are dads. I think that would be I think it'd actually be quite silly for someone to think that.
I just think it's part of women's autonomy.
What is?
Like being violent.
I think it's human
like
autonomy.
I'm a advocate of all sorts of autonomy, but women's autonomy included. And it's frustrating how women's autonomy never seems to extend to the things we don't like. I mean, I'm going to quote one of the feminists to you, Margaret Atwood.
Yes. Wait, I know this quote. This is about but the bad women being bad, right?
Yeah. This is so resonant.
Wait, I couldn't find this quote when I looked for it the other day.
It's from Am I a Bad Feminist from the Globe and Mail,
go on, read
Canada. She said, "My fundamental position is that women are human beings with the full range of saintly and demonic behaviours this entails, including criminal ones. They're not angels incapable of wrongdoing. If they were, we wouldn't need a legal system."
Yeah.
I'm like, that is just, women are human beings, capable of good and bad. That's what I mean autonomy. That's what autonomy is.
How we can bridge the conversation about domestic violence is, I think we generally need to have a conversation in society about violence. My issue isn't violence, basically. My issue is the value set around it. Right. Again, healthy expressions of violence would be combat, martial arts, like
boxing.
Yeah, expressing it in a setting, controlled environment, refereed, honor, discipline, stopping, surrender, not being seen as like a shame, going down honorably, like that kind of thing is brilliant. Like that value set's brilliant. So, and I think once we expand our conversation about violence and accept that as part of the human condition, we can begin to make assertions that aren't so fiercely gendered. So, for example, like, I think big people shouldn't hurt little people rather than men and women. Obviously, most big people are men and most little people are women. But if you frame it, when you're removing it from specifically gender, you can make other assumptions. Like, an adult woman might be violent towards a child boy because they can beat a child boy. Do you know what I mean? Because it's dishonorable. Do you get what I'm saying? It's the responsibility thing that comes with power.
I mean, there's obviously more types of power than just physical power.
Yeah, you know, and then we can talk about emotional violence, systemic violence. We can talk about, you know, I've seen people turn into shadows, men and women. Men turn into shadows in relationships from a deep level of psychological.
I mean, I agree. Men, generally speaking, have the mastery of the physical realm, but then women are equally advantaged in the emotional realm. Obviously, they can use that in terms of expressing themselves more clearly. But if they decide to use it to cause harm, then I'd say the emotional abuse can be as bad or worse than physical abuse.
Listen, girls and women are violent. You know, the conversation needs to be had. But I think from a female perspective or from a feminist perspective, it would seem that we would be running the risk of shifting the attention away from who they believe to be a more vulnerable part of society. Which is why my first point of advocacy is just protecting all children, regardless of their gender.
I agree with that, but that's where I get frustrated with Keir Starmer, who I'm sure will share a few words about how much we dislike him. Because I know one of his key policies was to halve violence against women and girls, which is admirable, and I agree. But the second thing he did, I think a few weeks later, he said he's not going to outlaw spanking children in England.
It's mental.
And I'm like, where do you think these men who are abusing would learn these lessons?
What an idiot.
And why is it acceptable to hit a child to correct misbehaviour, but then completely abhorrent to hit your partner? Like, surely hitting the child is worse.
It's worse. It is worse. It's dishonourable. That's what I'm trying to say. You have a responsibility as a person with more power, in this case, physical power. And you're right. Some people have responsibility if you have like more of an emotional understanding, or if you have more of a, you know, there's all these different forms of intelligence. If there's an understanding that you have a certain power in the scenario, maybe it's fame, maybe it's whatever, it's your responsibility to be conscious about how you use it. You can't be perfect, but you can certainly try. I think it would be great to have a bigger conversation around violence.
Well, definitely towards children, and especially by parents.
Which actually, a question I want to ask you, unless you want to ask me something pressing.
I mean, yeah, I want to hear your question, but it's just, the spanking thing is interesting because when I say that, and there'll be in the comments right now, I was spanked as a child. Oh yeah, I turned out great.
I turned out all right.
And I'm like, well, a third of people that are heavy smokers don't die from lung cancer. That doesn't mean smoking's healthy.
Yeah, of course.
That's not how stats work. And people say, well, I wasn't hit hard. So it's not about the physical power. It's about you're being hit by someone that's supposed to love you.
Yeah.
So that's why when you're talking about this big versus small, it's about someone that's supposed to love you hitting a partner. It could be a tiny little 5-foot woman beating up a 6'5" man. That doesn't mean he's the one in power. It's because there's so much more to it than that. And I know there's 6'5" men, and it's about the person, they're supposed to love you, but here they are being violent towards you. That's what I think really hurts.
I do think physical stature needs to be taken into account.
Sure, of course. I'm not saying, okay.
But I know what you're saying. I just think, I guess in that context, it would be like the responsibility is to get out of that situation rather than go back.
But this is obviously very controversial, but it's also, I've spoken to a lot of men that have known women that use that perspective on violence, where because he's big and she's small, she can do whatever she wants to him. And if he does anything about it, she was like, I'm going to call the police. I'm going to tell you that you're...
But you can, I'm just saying, just to be pedantic, there is a middle ground between the two.
Yeah.
If I was in a relationship where someone half my size was hitting me all the time, you know, this is what I mean. This is where we can meet on the point of male refuges hotlines to speak to, like guide that person away from that situation rather than risk them going to prison for causing some real damage. Because the truth is, you can cause real damage. That is the responsibility we have as most men, not all men, but most men have more physical.
I'd say the vast majority of men are far stronger than the vast majority of women.
So you have to deal with that responsibly, and it doesn't. And I would say the same. You would say the same to a boy or a woman, whatever the fuck. Don't hit anyone for anyone. Anyway, it does. That's not. I'm not saying if you're smaller than the person you're hitting, it's fine. Like, I mean, if someone's coming at you with a fucking knife or whatever the fuck, then it's different. You know what I mean? We got to be. I'm assuming people can also engage in critical thought here.
Yeah. Well, we'll meet you in the middle. Is that, I mean, the first person I ever interviewed was Erin Pitsey, who I'm sure I've told you about.
Yeah.
First refuge in the world opened by her, and she fundamentally believes violence is a generational issue, and it's purely about breaking the cycle of violence, not allowing it to keep going. And like all equations, you've got to look at both sides of the problem. And I would rather say we should be treating the issue rather than the gender, and the issue is violence. And both men and women can experience it in different ways, different severities, perhaps.
I know that a lot of people say male violence at the moment. The only thing I can say in that case is, what we're contending with as people in the space of boys and men advocacy is, unfortunately, the worst expressions of violence are perpetrated by men. So even if statistically it's more balanced, obviously it's going to be more sensational, isn't it? Listen, the grey area is what we should be focusing on, but I'm saying I can understand how you can sell that. That's the end result.
But that's a bit like what we were saying earlier. Like, yes, women make up majority of people killed by partner. It's about 3-1. But most abuse is nothing like that. That's like the tiny.
Yeah, no, I understand.
And if we don't deal with the mundane violence, I'd call it, lack of a better term, then we're only allowing it to escalate it. So I feel like, a bit like going back in time, we need to stop violence at the pushing and shoving and screaming and slapping phase, so it doesn't escalate to this.
Yes.
These horrendous crimes that are mostly by men.
And also, outside of that, most people's issue is a very small section of men. Most people. And what upsets me is that men and women can be aligned in their desire to not be harmed by these particularly violent men. Like, sometimes when I hear this discussion of the fear that women will feel, which is real, and the concerns, whatever else, I just can think of all the boys and men I know who would feel the same thing, and they're innocent. And I think we can meet in that shared thing. What can we change to reduce harm on men and women from, let's say, a small subsection of men? Alcoholism is a big one. Hitting children is a big one. Like, we can deal with these as communities rather than splitting it and polarizing people's opinions, I think.
I'm sure I'm accused of being polarizing often, but what I'm genuinely trying to do...
You do seem to have a rep.
I want to meet these people.
Well, like, you say this to me a lot, that people don't come near you with a barge pole. Why do you think that is?
Because I think I represent a set of political ideas that are very uncomfortable to acknowledge and go against people's fundamental identity.
I said to one friend I was coming on this, and he showed me a comment of yours as a response. He was like, "Oh, that's, Is
this your question, by the way?
It will be.
Okay, go on.
And it was you commenting under, who's that young girl from Cambridge?
Oh my God, yeah.
Tilly.
Yeah. I cringe when I hear people, grown adults, talk about the patriarchy.
Yeah. But see, that's odd.
What's odd about it?
What does that mean?
I think the idea of us living in a patriarchy in the UK currently, I find to be quite a cartoonish idea that I really wish we would outgrow.
Patriarchy? You don't believe patriarchy exists?
I don't think that's the best way of viewing UK society today.
Best way of viewing, or think it doesn't exist?
I would say there's better views of the world. Like, I would prefer to talk about things like gender norms that I do agree are harmful and cut both ways. But that's often what people are talking about when they say the patriarchy. But
does it help you if you meant to define it as capitalist patriarchy?
I just think gendering it is harmful. I think patri, meaning father, meaning man, is very much pushing the blame onto men's side.
What blame? You don't. You think patriarchy is a term people use to deflect blame onto men.
No,
you don't see it as like as a systemic.
I think it quite literally names everything bad in the world after men, and it does for everyone for all of time. And I think that's just
in your mind. Did men invent capitalism?
I don't think anyone invented capitalism.
Really?
No. I think people sat down on a boardroom and invented capitalism. That's what this is, like the cartoonish view of the world that I'm tired of.
Wait. I need to put this is interesting. So hold on. So how do you think capitalism came about?
I think it's a natural product of
it's an evolution.
Breed.
And during that time, how was the world structured? Like, roughly in a family, how was that structured?
Well, we lived in a feudalist world, didn't we, before capitalism, which is where we had lords and ladies, and we lived in the land of serfs, and it was a different type of exploitation in many ways. And then capitalism arrived. I don't think it wasn't like we invented capitalism, and guess what? It was men. That sounds like a cartoon to me. And that's where I think the idea of the patriarchy is childish in my view. I think it's just there's better views of the world.
But you would argue that the current structure of society isn't set up to work to men's perceived interests.
But the thing is that this is what frustrates me: the world systems.
Yeah.
Like, these are what system we're talking about? Education system, or the healthcare system? We're talking about the psychological system. What are we talking about? Money, finance. Like, what are we talking about?
So, for example, like pretty much all infrastructure is owned by men, right? Like everything that run, like buildings, trains, like sewage systems, Like all of these things are owned by men, no?
Wow.
Like the healthcare, for example. You know, it's not.
I don't know what that means.
What do you mean?
What do you mean? I don't know what you're specifically talking about, or who you're specifically talking about.
My point is, if infrastructure is like owned, run, and it ends up wealth gets amassed specifically towards men, that there's power in that, no? Or maybe let me reduce it. So if we're talking about healthcare, right? The steel man to my argument would be men die younger, right? It's a fair point. But then if you look at the research around healthcare, it's angled towards men anyway.
That's like this is what viewing the world through this idea of it being a patriarchy. I find.
No. But viewing it through the reality of like, if the world was set up for both genders, for example, then why would there be such little research put into like female, like physical health, for example?
I just don't think that's true.
Well, how is it not true?
It's just literally not true.
It is true.
Do you know how many offices for women's health there are in America? Federally funded offices.
Yeah.
There's 10.
Yeah.
How many for men?
Yeah, because people would think
0.
But I'm saying that like our definitions of health, our definitions of disease,
they've gone back as far as 1965 and looked at like medical trials. You're describing clinical trials, and women have been represented in at least equal to their proportion of society as far back as 1965. I don't know before that, but I would say the medical research done before then doesn't have as value
on what?
as.
Of medical research on what?
On everything, all
everything. So like endometriosis, like specific.
Well, not endometriosis, but
yeah, but this is what I'm trying to say. Specifically, issues that women specifically face are I'm sure, categorically underfunded. And also, they were even saying that a lot of the trials weren't run on female lab rats because they couldn't. It was more difficult to make conclusions based off of the hormonal balance and imbalance of a female rat than it is of a male woman.
Your argument that we live in a patriarchy is that we didn't use female rats in medical trials.
My argument for the idea of patriarchy, which by the way I don't feel any identification with at all. My argument for it is like, in my belief, let's say, what do we cherish most in life? Like, what would be the most important thing in life? Would be new life, no? Like childbirth. What have we set up in society or the system that we run that ensures that is cultivated as the most safe space for a human being? Women aren't allowed to just leave jobs if they have chronic period pains, which is a very common thing. Women obviously struggle in certain jobs because of the potential they might get pregnant. Like the maternity leave, paternity leave, all of these things seem to be a stress. Even men getting paternity leave, all of these things are a stress. We should be building our society around this like magical thing that occurs where we create new life. And yet it seems that there's like nothing seems to make that whole process easier, basically. And I think that at the very least, it should be egalitarian in that respect. It feels as if it's set up purely to make profit in business, and that's it. And that's why I said the capitalist thing is important, because patriarchy, the idea of like a family being run by a dad or granddad, I've got no issue with that. The issue is that capitalism rewards a particular type of behavior and comes at the expense of like many people and a lot of, if not all, women.
Well, I agree. You mentioned so many things I agree with. Like, if we want to have a conversation about capitalism, let's have a conversation.
But that would I think. But that's what people are talking about, though. Is capitalist patriarchy.
I'd rather have a series of separate, delineated conversations around capitalism, paternity pay, health. Which, if your basis of the patriarchy is that women's health is underfunded, that's just not true. Like, men's health right now is underfunded, and women have at least back in 65.
Female-specific health issues. Bro, like, I looked this up the other day because someone was talking to me about this chronic period pain, and when you look for, like, why is this not being dealt with? Because there's no fucking money in research for it. There's no way of handling it. You're just expected to get on with it.
If we're going to talk about reproductive health, this is what I find frustrating, because I totally agree. Like, I feel the same way about women in endometriosis and reproductive health. Totally.
Polycystic ovaries, all this kind of...
Yes, fully, 100%. But the frustration I find is that why is that being built into this kind of spooky sounding theory, the patriarchy?
What's spooky sounding about it?
It just sounds divisive and...
Okay, maybe...
But before I finish, I want to ask you, we talked about women's reproductive health being underfunded, under-researched, gynecology and stuff like that. But what do you think a male reproductive specialist is called?
Yeah, I don't know.
No one knows, because men's reproductive health is also underfunded. So yeah, we have gynecology, and you're talking about things like endometriosis are underfunded, and I agree. I'm never going to be against more funding, more research for that. But it's the fact that people suggest that we are doing more for men's reproductive health when we're clearly not. Because
well, there's more research, for example, on like erectile dysfunction.
I know, but that's different. This is what I find frustrating, because the reason why there's so much funding on that sort of stuff, and like people say, well, male pattern baldness gets a lot of funding, that's because they're capitalist, sort of venture-funded research areas where there's a lot of money in solving erectile dysfunction and baldness especially, and there's no money in solving polycystic ovarian syndrome.
But how's that? So yeah,
because that's why it gets more funding. Right. The reason why it gets more funding isn't because we value men's sexuality and sexual health more than women's.
This is why I say. Okay, this is why I'm saying it's important, maybe for you specifically, to have capitalist patriarchy. You've just said to me the reason why there's more research into those specific issues for men's sexual health is because it's profitable.
Yeah,
but that idea of profit.
So let's talk about capitalism then. I feel like
yes, but you don't even think capitalism was a thing that has come into being as a consequence of the patriarchal world that was existing when it was developed.
But I guess what I'm saying is you comparing erectile dysfunction to endometriosis or polycystic ovarian syndrome or whatever else, and saying one gets more funding than the other, and therefore we value men because of the patriarchy. I think it's because it gets venture capital funding. And if you were to compare it to like Botox or plastic surgery, there's even more funding for that because there's an industry there that's demanding it, and there's more venture capital and there's more returns. And I'm absolutely happy to talk about capitalism and how damaging it can be.
But I think that's inextricably linked. You can't. I really truly believe that. Honestly, maybe I'm wrong, but like I really truly believe that. Why else would the people with the most money in this society, who have the most like influence on infrastructure, on technology, whatever, government, why are they these particular types of people that I would never want to be? Why the fuck am I listening to like Mark Zuckerberg's opinion on anything, Elon Musk's opinion on anything? Like, it shouldn't be that way. The system has created it so these people become the cream at the top. Like, that doesn't make sense. If it wasn't what people you disagree with would say capitalist patriarchy, we'd have way more variation of the type of fucking power. In fact, Bell Hooks calls it white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, specifically for this reason, because you see the eventuality. There's loads of nuance in the middle, but you see the eventuality of the system and what type of person and how they end up there. I can understand that maybe there's some conversations where people dismiss discussions and just say, oh, it's patriarchy. I get that. But for me, it seems like you say it's like a childish thing. For me, it seems mad you saying that, because I've grown up in a world where men will name their child their name. The kids are called Junior because they're the same name as their dad. There's no women called Junior because they're the same name as their mum. Like, patriarchy as a concept was established when human beings realized that a single sperm created a child. So then men created all types of shame and fear and whatever around women being sexually explorative because they wanted to guarantee their male heir. That's literally it. It's like to guarantee their hierarchy, right? Like, that was the genesis of this thing. All the other systems came into place afterwards. I don't think I am like, when I hear patriarchy, I don't think anyone's insulting me.
I don't find it insulting.
I think capitalist patriarchy is an accurate reflection of a world that is built for, if you abide by all of its rules, you get there. And the rules are no emotion, profit only, driven, busy. We have hardwired, in my opinion, into our society, a rejection of femininity expressed. Like, expressed, like you say, you come from a world where sexual fluidity for women, for example, that's a thing. Men being effeminate, punished. Like, femininity is punished. Why would a world that was built without like a patriarchal undertone punish femininity? Do you know what I'm saying? You don't think femininity gets punished in this world?
I'm saying that's such a broad statement that I don't even...
It's not.
You said so many things to me. I don't know how to deal with a single one of them.
Okay.
Like, it's like the Gishgalop approach where it's just like pa.
Okay, sorry.
There's so many things.
Okay, sorry.
I want to have a specific conversation about one of these things.
Okay,
and that's what I feel like patriarchy theory as a concept lowers the resolution of all these different separate issues. Most of them I agree with and I feel the same way, but I just don't think we need to link them all together.
But if you can make that, that's odd to me. So you can deal with every single individual.
Yeah. People say the patriarchy caused the pay gap, for example. I hear that quite often. But we can have a conversation about why men in the median are paid more than women. And I think if we had that conversation, it'll take a long time, but I don't think it is because
But why are you willing to risk somebody paying attention to the good work you do over a word that you actually understand fundamentally?
Because I think that term and the fact that it paints sexism in such a unilateral way, as in it's against women, I feel like it erases so many of the issues I talk about. I guess put it into a real life example, I talk a lot about domestic violence. Men and boys, as we both agree,
Yeah, of course.
fall through the cracks in interventions.
Yeah, of course.
There's almost no refuge. There's very little help for them.
Yeah.
The reason why that is because about 50 years ago, someone called Ellen Pence co-founded the model of abuse called Duluth model, which is predicated on the idea that domestic violence is a man enacting patriarchal violence onto his wife or spouse. And that was later found not to be true because it's not unilateral and women are violent too. And we can argue about how it splits. But the fact that we thought domestic violence was caused by the patriarchy actually caused unimaginable harm to men and boys because it replaced what is a really difficult set of risk factors to understand. There's about 30 risk factors that decide what domestic violence is. It's not just one single thing.
So when did you say this?
The Duluth model?
Yeah.
Oh, it's like the 70s.
Yeah, but surely back then.
But that's when it's a low resolution view of the world where we're better now. We've got real modern tools to understand what causes domestic violence, what causes the pay gap, what causes all different things you can talk about. We can have that in like a delineated, grown-up way where we can be specific and don't lean into these quite crude, cartoonish views that I don't appreciate. I think are quite divisive.
Yeah.
And erase the men's experience in terms of victimhood, I think. That's why I get annoyed at people that use that term because I think it undoes the work I try to do, where I'm trying to increase the resolution and try and give people better words and better tools to understand the world we live in.
So I agree that people can use that term to derail actually healthy conversation, but I just find it intellectually dishonest I find it like that way. I'm not trying to say that you are this, but like in this context, I don't understand why you can't just do both things. Like I think.
What are the two things?
Like understands the framework of the world and why it's sort of not of benefit to men or women largely, and that's why people use that term. I personally, in my spaces, I don't use or perceive that term to be a dismissal of men's issues. I think one of men's biggest issues is the fact that the world has been over the time evolved into a space where connection isn't something that's rewarded or celebrated or cultivated. And I think that some people describe that as patriarchy, capitalist patriarchy. I personally don't say that as like fathers do this.
In that, can't you just say gender norms?
Who decided the gender norms?
No one decided the gender norms. You're acting like there's some man or board of men that are like passing down these rules.
Yes, they are. They literally are.
What
do you mean?
Who decides gender norms? I feel like that's...
If you see a boy or a man being punished for expressing femininity, like continuously through generations, why wouldn't you then develop the idea that it's not okay to be feminine as a man, for example?
Because...
Whereas with women, you can be masculine, it's not an issue. Women express their masculinity all the time and are celebrated for it. Anytime if like a gay, effeminate man was to move towards power, they'd be completely ridiculed by men, I think, by these current standards. I don't think some women would ridicule them, but not all women.
Well, I read research that this is Canadian research, I found that it's mostly mothers who are censoring boys' expression of pain rather than fathers. Fair. I mean, I've seen research on both sides, but what I'm trying to say is that if we could just use, in this example at least, the word gender norms, you and I can get along just fine, and so could everyone else.
How would you use that in replace of patriarchy?
I'd say gender norms, rigid gender norms at least, can really cause harm both to men and women, boys and girls, and we all perpetuate them. We don't have to talk about this. It just feels like some sort of supervillain that's hanging above us, when in reality, we're talking about gender norms, or we can talk about the pay gap and we'll talk about the mother.
Do you prefer capitalist patriarchy?
No, I mean, I'm going to probably piss you off even more, but I think capitalism has done some good to society. I mean, we're all better off in many ways as a result of capitalism and worse off in many ways. What I'm in favour of is specific conversations that are delineated about specific things rather than trying to explain everything with one catchphrase, be it patriarchal, capitalist patriarchy or whatever else. And I just think that word comes from like 50, 60 years ago, and I'm really starting to feel it's quite antiquated in my view. And it erases so much detail and pisses everyone off, I think. I mean, it pisses off a lot of men. And I just think we can do better. We have like science now. We have economics. We have psychology.
I hear it.
Psychology. We can use real science.
Why? But I'm just so good. I just say, why would it piss someone off? I just find that fascinating.
Because it's
like, why would it? What's?
Because there's 50 million men in America who are abused in their lifetime, which isn't much less than the amount of women. And none of them are getting helped because the entire domestic violence industry in America is predicated upon the fact that we live in a patriarchy. And that,
I don't agree with that.
Well, then the patriarchy theory has given birth to these frameworks like Duluth that have cause the amount of harm that we can't even begin to imagine.
Yeah, but bro, the amount of harm that like society has caused women generally for like hundreds of years,
and I agree with that.
Imagine.
I agree with both.
Subjugation.
I agree.
Yeah, but
I feel strongly about that.
So why can't you understand it?
I'm talking specifically about a model that's come from a specific idea and harmed a specific group of people.
I think that for a large part of the last hundreds, if not thousands of years, and also for a lot of the world now, there is an expectation that women's labour, in many senses, is just expected. It's expected. It's not rewarded. It's not elevated within the current system. It's not whatever. It's just something that's happened, and I can understand, even if some things I don't agree with, I can understand once there has been more space to be able to air those grievances, why that women would say or do certain things. Not always, sometimes to their detriment, future detriment. I can understand it.
Okay, I want to know what you mean by women's labour. We're talking about like raising children and stuff like that.
Housekeeping, raising children. The argument is, you can go out and like earn your keep within this infrastructure, or you could have done historically 100 years ago, and actually be given money and whatever else, and then everything else is expected to be done. And there's obviously themes, the idea of like silence, compliance, all of that. That's the history that we bring with us. But that's the difference perhaps between our perception. I don't hear that term and imagine that like loads of men are being abused by that term. I hear it and go, yeah, I agree. The current setup of system, whatever you want to call it, I would say capitalist patriarchy, is of benefit to nobody, because I'm watching who's at the top of it. Like, surely that would be the best expression of like, who wins this game? Those people win this game. I don't like the game. I don't care what it's called. I want a new game. I don't know why a man would feel vilified by that.
That's what the word patri means. It means father, ruler. It means men are the rulers of the family. And anyone that's going to take any amount of time outside of family court, speaking to the men that come out of those family courts, will absolutely realise that father does not have...
In this country, you can
how can a man
be
the ruler?
Global. That's not a global
Fine,
thing.
I'm talking about the UK. If we're going to talk about Afghanistan, then absolutely we can talk about the patriarchy, and I would agree with you.
Okay, so you're saying patriarchy doesn't exist in the UK?
I mean that specifically, yeah. In the UK today... I'm not talking about 100 years ago. I'm not talking about Afghanistan or the Middle East. Okay. I agree. Although I'd rather view that through that view of religion.
It does feel silly to argue over a word when we agree on so much.
Everyone will agree that Afghanistan has a lot of patriarchal elements to it. But to use the same word to describe that in the UK, I feel like it's fundamentally dishonest and causes a lot of harm to Afghanistan women. And I feel that's why I want better words, more words, specific words. Yeah. And the word patriarchy means father ruler. And I don't know how a man could be the ruler of the family when he doesn't even have equal rights. And that's why it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Yeah, etymology doesn't make sense in the way it's applied, and often it causes huge amounts of harm, such as through domestic violence.
So just maybe we can just finish it here. No, because I just want to finish it here. I hear what you're saying, right? 100%. You're right. The family structure, specifically now in the UK, isn't in any way, well, it doesn't have that level of imbalance that the term
male dominate.
But the system, I believe, the system, the infrastructure that still exists, that we are operating differently within, still elevates that same type of person or type of being, and it predates the current state of the UK. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. I don't think with our approach to it, we've shifted dramatically, like who gets to rise to the top. I don't think we have. There's loads of women, for example, who are like doing incredibly well on like I said, on a median level, wages. We saw the new statistics around women in their 20s. Amazing. CEOs.
Why is it amazing when women earn more than men, but it's not amazing when I say...
Because they've come from not.
For women in their 20s, it's not like they've been fighting for hundreds of years.
Yeah. Well, it's not okay if it's not amazing. It's just a statistic. I'm just saying, like, comparative to what it might have been. It obviously changes in the 30s because kids come along.
What I think is, what I'll leave you with is that obviously people talk about the patriarch and they'll often talk about Mark Zuckerberg, as you have, who I fucking hate. But he's just
Mark Zuckerberg.
Mark Zuckerberg, all of those rich billionaire CEOs, presidents, Donald Trump, all of them. I hate him. I hate him as much as you. Yeah. But they are such a small percentage of men, and that they only cover a tiny, tiny percentage of men. But I like to view gender equality through things like education. Everyone goes for education, health, life expectancy. By every single metric, men and boys are behind in education and health. And we can debate about research funding, but those are such more accurate barometers for
Of
equality
society.
than some billionaire arsehole who we both hate. And I'm like, that's not the lived experience of hardly any men.
No, but I agree.
Patriarchy is obsessed with the apex of men.
I think we'll agree to disagree. I agree with you on this. I think you hear it and you get your back up. I don't hear it and get my back up. I hear it and think, yes, I too would like the world to be shifted so it can accommodate way more men and way more women.
It's just frustrating that we seem to agree, but we disagree on
Is it because
semantics.
of the term?
It's semantics.
I know it's a term, but listen, like I said, I've done a lot of reading around this space. We talk about this privately a lot. I too would love a revision of the educational system. I would love there to be even my advocacy for men understanding how they feel would tie into the idea of men's health. To be honest, I think a lot of illness and physical issues stem from like an emotional disconnection as well. Like Gabor Mate, a lot of his research I really agree with in terms of how stress manifests.
He's changed my view single-handedly about drug addiction.
Yeah.
He said, don't ask why the addiction, ask why the pain.
Yeah, right.
And I was like, it's so rare to have someone change your mind like
in a
that.
sentence.
And I was like, he's done it. And now I'm fully for like legalizing drugs so we can see it as a health issue rather than a criminal one. Yeah. Well, let's call it
No, we shouldn't finish on that.
Well,
We'll talk about something else.
Yeah, we will do.
Okay.
But I want to say that I know people pass around my comments that they don't like, but they never, so rarely talk to me about it.
Oh yeah,
as you have, and I appreciate you being so forthright about it.
No, but not
that I was expecting it, but
you weren't expecting it.
Well, I was expecting to be interrogated.
No, I'm not interrogating it. No, because look, this is genuinely my stance, which I find interesting. Is that from my perspective, since I've known you, I felt as though you were cautious of me when I first started engaging with TheTinMen, because I think from the work you've done, which you're like tirelessly finding papers and research, and there's like complete contradictions, and you get into the comments and people are saying wild shit and arguing shit. You get a lot of people messaging you privately, men and women. And I felt like I've seen you be like hardened by the public response, because at the same time as you found this research, there's also a normalization of a dismissal of that kind of research, which I'm trying to find the balanced way of doing. I feel like you and I have a silent agreement where it's like I can almost articulate research that you found in a more palatable way. And I think if there is any tension that people feel towards TheTinMen or you personally, is because, and please, this is your time, I think, to really explain it. I think you have been battered. No, but I think you've been battered to the point where you will go under a video of like a 22-year-old girl and say, you're deluded for saying the word patriarchy. You didn't need to do that.
Deluded.
Okay, sorry.
I think if you're using a platform to present ideas that I personally find harmful, then your age or your gender doesn't mean you get a free pass.
But am I wrong in thinking that your worldview's been hardened perhaps by the pushback you've had against what you think?
I honestly don't think so. I think I was more harsh, more hardened at the beginning. I was pissed off. And now, although I do get some silly comments, I get way more messages of support. Really? Way more. Like if I were to write down the last 100 DMs I've got, 99% of them would be like, thank you.
Thank you, yeah.
Thank you. And every now and again, get an idiot. But I don't feel hardened. I feel privileged and blessed, which I am, to have this space and to have these conversations. And I genuinely am trying my best. But part of that is challenging people from both sides. I genuinely do not find the patriarchy an accurate, increasingly inaccurate term. And I think it does a lot more harm than good. And I think there are much better words we can use and that are more grown up. What I find frustrating and so counter to my personal experience is that the patriarchy theory tells us that, men have had their say, men have decided everything, men have been centered. But at the same time, my personal experience, I didn't share my second name. I have to hide what I got to say, genuinely terrified often about people that want to track me down and ruin my life. Yeah, right. And I'm like, well, that doesn't feel very patriarchal for me and my lived experience, where if I was on the other side, and I used to be a feminist for many years, people were a lot more accepting of when I spoke about women, but as soon as you start speaking about men,
well, we can agree on that, but that's why I think sometimes it's about tact.
I mean, we can agree about what's right versus what's effective, and I'm sure me posting these comments is not very effective, but that feels right and righteous to me because that's genuinely how I feel. I'm sure I could phrase things better, and I genuinely think most people side with me. Most people are not feminists. Most people that believe in gender equality, which is thankfully the vast majority of people, are not feminists. And I think we are tired.
Most people who believe in gender equality aren't feminists. How do you separate those two?
You ask them, are you a feminist? Do you believe in gender equality? It's a poll, YouGov. If most people that believe in gender equality are not feminists, most people who believe in gender equality do not believe in the patriarchy theory and are sat on my side of the table. And I think people are fed up who just want to get to work, on men and boys and women and girls, without being riddled, beleaguered with these, in my opinion, unhelpful terms that create way more heat, very little light, and push us away and divide us.
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely agree to disagree on that. I don't, does not emit the same amount of frustration with me at all. I care deeply about boys and men's issues, but I'm not bothered about that term. I'm really not. I'd rather, like I say, I'd rather just get to the crux of what you're talking about, which I agree with massively, that there are inequalities that I think it's within women's, feminists, whatever, interest, and a lot of the people that speak to feel that way once speaking about it directly. I know from what you see, you know, there are going to be, of course, like with many movements, like people who are dismissive or like refuse to engage. And I don't agree with that. That's why I wanted to come into a space, because I feel like I've got more of an open approach to feminism.
And what lessons could you teach me then on how to talk to women that you represent? I mean, a quarter of my followers are women.
Yeah, I know.
People seem to think it's all men, and there's plenty of pissed off women too, I tell you that much.
Yeah. No, but I hear it a lot, because when I've been talking about boys, a lot of mums are in my DMs,
So
man,
many
because it's
Same.
really fucking hard raising a boy in this society. I oftentimes will say, leave, especially teenage boys, children, leave them out of this fucking conversation where, like, yeah, they're going to do some dumb, bad shit, like, and that's not cool. But to say that, like, they may do dumb, bad shit because they're boys and men, like, I don't agree with that. And a lot of mums agree with me that that's not cool. Why would you want to put that message into the minds of young men and boys? Like, so just to be clear, like, I don't know what I can suggest to you at all. I admire, you know, in many cases, your pursuit of truth. I recognize that in my life experience, some conversations are more difficult to have than others. And when people are coming to things from a place of pain, frustration, anguish, which, you know, there'll be some waves, especially of feminism, who come to that, it's going to be tougher to have certain conversations. So I try and focus on points where we can agree, you know? Preserving human innocence. I think we can all agree. I don't think a man is born and he is inherently suspicious.
That, I guess, one of the nubs of the whole patriarchy theory. It got a feeling of original sin to it.
Yeah, whereas we're not going to agree on the patriarchy thing.
Well, that's what I'm trying to explain. Is like it feels
like God. People think God's a man. That's patriarchal to me. We live in a world where, like, the biggest, you know, religion still runs shit, and the biggest faiths center themselves around fatherly figures. That, I'm just saying, that is the genesis of this world.
If we want to talk about the context of religion, then I would say certainly.
But that's massive.
Massive patriarchy.
That's huge.
But most people in the UK are not religious. Most people now are.
Oh, dude,
non-religious.
Come on. I'm asking you for an understanding. I'm not asking for, like, specificity. I'm saying, when I hear it, that's what I feel. History, hundreds of years, millennia, centered around the idea of this fatherly presence. You know, like, for example, there's the word avuncular. What's the female version of avuncular? I don't know. Just to come back to your thing about
andrologist.
What was a male gynecologist?
Yeah.
But, like, is that the word?
Andrologist, someone who studies male reproduction.
Oh, that's
so the male equivalent of the. So you've learned Alexithemia. You've learned andrologist.
Well, can I say one thing?
And there's also the andropause, by the way, which is the male menopause. But
that's cool.
Yeah.
Oh my god. What's that? What?
Andropause.
Oh yeah.
But the final word I'll teach, which is like really relevant, I think, to this conversation. Almost certainly going to pronounce it wrong. Parrhesia.
Yes.
Which is a Greek word meaning to speak freely.
Yes.
And apologise for so speaking. And what that means is like to say what is on your mind and what you think about the person opposite you, and then to apologise if you feel like you've got it wrong. But it's the idea of speaking freely about fear.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something you've set a great example with.
Oh, thank you.
And I try to do the best.
I'm trying to do it more, though, because it is hard, because I do still, even though I can do it sometimes, I deeply fear rejection. One of my core wounds is rejection and abandonment. You know, if I say the wrong thing to a person, wrong in their mind, they go. But I'm learning, obviously, that if they want to go with me expressing that word you just said, then that's fine in my life.
That's what I've learned from you. So I look at your comments and your content too, where I see someone that's genuinely trying their best.
Oh, yes.
Although we don't agree on everything. I hope we agree on most. I can always respect you exposing yourself to these difficult discussions and leaving yourself open to being wrong. That's what I think.
Yes.
I really hate people that are very certain about something and are not open to being wrong, when most of us we're always wrong about something.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're very vulnerable.
Yes.
And I
get wrong. I'm wrong all the time. Yeah. I genuinely do just want to learn. I do just want to learn. And I find, you know, the conversation's frustrating sometimes, but I guess just as like an interest, I do find people fascinating. I find all people fascinating. I find patterns of behavior fascinating, and
that's what I mean. I agree. There's patterns, and like it's like as we said about if you hit a child when they're young, you're only increasing the chance that that child's going to hit someone they love for the same reasons.
I know,
and those are the sort of evidence-based scientific discussions I want to have.
You want to have, yeah.
I've never seen a single domestic violence campaign about spanking children.
Really?
Not
in the UK?
one. No, never.
I spoke about it. I said it in a round table about violence against women and girls. I made that point of the hitting children, again, alcoholism, all these other elements that are worth discussing. If you are, go back to the same thing. If you're feeling something, wouldn't it be great to empower somebody to feel that thing and express it in a way in which it's done and you move on? What happens is they don't feel the thing, they feel frustrated. How do they cope? They go, they have a drink. What do? They come back and they outlet a toxic version of that initial feeling that happened ages ago, which could have been expressed healthily. Like, I don't think that kind of literacy is a crazy idea for people to have. I really passionately don't feel that.
The sad thing about men and their coping mechanisms that they often make the problem worse. They'll drink, they'll gamble, they'll do drugs, they'll watch porn. It's all, you're not actually solving the problem, you're making the problem worse. And
I think men feel a lot. I think to go back to literally how you started this whole thing, about men being heartbroken, I really think men feel a lot. Like it would make sense that in any other context, people who are very protective are trying to stop something happening because they know what it feels like. I really think at some point I
had a weird scene jump into my head when you were talking a little bit about getting into fights and stuff.
Yeah,
it's from the Peep Show, which is where so much wisdom. That show is so progressive, by the way, in terms of so many things. One of them is Big Mad Andy, where Jeremy's trying to give him therapy, and Jeremy says something like, he wants to get into fights, but really doesn't want to get into a fight. He wants to get punched because he hates himself.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's so
true. Saw loads of that as a
self-harm, like men who punch walls is
massive self-harm.
A man who gets into a fight and knows he's going to do that's self-harm.
Yeah.
A man who drinks, a man who does drugs, who gambles.
Yeah.
Those are acts of self-harm. But because a lot of our view of distress is centered on women, that falls through the cracks.
What, the male self-harm?
Male self-harm, for example, you often talk about cutting.
Yeah.
Because our view of self-harm is centered on women, how they self-harm. Whereas a man who punches a wall is another act of self-harm, but that's seen as something different completely. And that's where I think P word is unhelpful, because there are certain places where women's lived experience have been centered. Eating disorders, mental health in general, the psychological industry dominated by women.
Yeah, it's not closed off to I think male intervention. In my book, I talk about eating disorders is something I know to be an increasingly prevalent issue for boys.
Do you know what percentage of research participants in eating disorders are male?
Research participants?
Yeah, well, I think it's less than 5% of research participants in eating disorders are.
I don't think a lot of boys will even recognise that they have eating disorders.
But then the reason,
I don't think that's because of girls.
No, I'm not saying. But I don't want to blame anyone. I just want to make this statement, an objective fact that only tiny percent of eating disorder participants in research have been men and boys. We don't understand how eating disorders present in boys as a result.
Yes.
And men and boys are paying a price to their lives. Like 2/3 of eating disorders are female, 1/3 are male. But I think men are about 3 times more likely to die from eating disorder, because the way it presents, we don't see it until it's too late.
But what's stopping some men from doing more research on it?
Hopefully it wouldn't just be men doing the research, but I guess people don't realise there's a problem. I think most people listening to this will be learning for the first time that men are a much higher mortality risk when they have an eating disorder, despite being a minority of those impacted. And part of that's because the way we research eating disorders is centred on how it presents in women. I'm trying to say there's different systems. There's not just one big system in the sky. There's loads of different systems, and they're dominated by men and women to the detriment of men and women. And I want to have conversations.
And it's dependent on funding.
I mean, I am read enough to know why exactly that's happening.
I can understand a desire to focus on female eating disorders because of the scrutiny that women would experience on their appearance. And a lot of the eating disorders are based off of their external perception, whereas with boys, for a long time, there's been more leeway in terms of how a body's presented. It's definitely changing now. It's a recent thing. I saw a study before about like cartoon characters, for example, and like the body shapes of cartoon characters. And you can just even think back to childhood. There was all ranges of body types for boys. For girls, like nearly every character had a ridiculously small waist. Like it doesn't even make sense. You still see it in anime now, you see it in whatever, like it's ridiculous.
I agree. There has been some progress, not enough for women and eating disorders. And now I feel a lot of ways men are being left behind. I know, like,
yeah, we need to catch up. In fact, and that's why I want to talk more about it, like, because Marvel's changed, men are ridiculously, everyone's roided up.
It's crazy how, like, Wolverine, when you see Hugh Jackman take his top off.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
So what it is
he
now.
was like a big buff dad. That's fine. But now he's like
CGI. A monster.
And to get that, he's talked about it. He has to not drink water for 3 days. He has to dehydrate his body for 3 days. Henry Cable the same when he did Witcher.
Yeah.
And he talks about being able to smell water.
Horrible.
On set. That's not healthy.
It's disgusting.
That's
it's abuse.
Yeah, it's abuse.
Self-harm.
And it's obviously perpetuating unhealthy body type that you literally can never achieve.
I know. So why is he doing it?
Because they get paid to do it and they don't think it's a problem. Because the conversations are lacking around.
Well, I don't like
these things. All right. Well, last question I have to you. I want to know, how do you change your mind? How do we help other people change their mind? I mean, I think I've watched you change your mind quite often. Not necessarily today, maybe a little bit, but in the past, God knows how many years I've spoken to you, you change your mind more than most people, and hopefully to the betterment of yourself.
Yeah.
And especially in politics, when we're so entrenched in our tribe, and we don't want to concede anything. What can you tell me or people listening how to change their mind around politics, especially, and find that mutual ground?
Fuck. I mean, I just think everything in life should be centered around connection. I really do. That's just like I think that's my most overarching philosophy, is what I believe in, or my value set, encouraging me to feel more connected to the world, myself, people around me. And if it's not, then I would look at ways in which I can change it. You know, if I have fallen into a belief system that is disconnecting me from people, then I would want to question it. I like to change my mind because the more connected I am to people and my community, the more chance I'm going to hear, like real life anecdotes, experience, see real life implications of things. And then I put that into my frame of, reference and add it to the whatever pattern I'm trying to create in my brain. And sometimes you just got to switch a bit. For example, like I said, when I was younger, I was probably like a faux feminist, like, one of these guys just pointing fingers at being like, yeah, this guy's trash, this guy's whatever. And then I got older and realized that I was a massive problem to myself and to the people I was in a relationship with. Actually, the reason why I love feminism is because I just saw community and I saw encouragement and uplifting. Like, it was incredibly empowering. This belief that girls and women can do anything, change anything. And now, as an adult man, having done loads of fucking therapy, I just want that same level of community and upliftment for the boys and men around me. And I feel like that will encourage connection. And if people have ideas, like, for example, a woman would say something hyperbolic, similar to something I'd question a man about, I would have the same amount of frustration regardless of the context for it, because it doesn't encourage connection to me, Like, I saw a video of a guy trying to give builders flowers and they've called him gay. And then someone commented underneath saying, this is why women don't give men flowers. That pisses me off. Because that I have a framework there, If I'm watching a video of a small subsection of a population, I'm not going to make an assumption of the entire population. That's my general outlook. So I have to maintain that consistency. Basically, yes, my point is I will change and shift if the change and shift would encourage a greater level of connection in a space that also supports my values, if that even makes sense. I'm worried that it's like a word salad. But the only things promised in life are change and death. That's literally the quote I put at the beginning of my book, because an Uber driver said it to me, which is hilarious. Changing, adapting is survival. Evolution is survival. That's why I want to challenge the idea of like what we consider to be male or masculine or man or whatever, because evolution is survival. Adapting is brilliant. Changing, shifting, like progression. Like, I love that, and I want it to be a spiritual progression, not not just a purely material technological thing. Sometimes it's not even a progression; it's a return. I want to say one thing as well. Maybe one thing I've also changed is, for various reasons, growing up, like I might have had a certain animosity towards men who are very sure about what a man is, and then as I've got older and gone through this, and celebrating the women in my life and my aunties and my mum and my grands, like, I fucking love men. I love men and I love boys. I really do. And I don't want that to be a radical statement. Like I really, truly, with all my heart, appreciate all the men in my life that have shown up for me when they didn't need to. So that's like my football coaches, like I say, people at my after school club. Like there's smiles and there's looks and there's expressions that I will never forget. And that includes discipline. A guy called Rich was a football coach that I had in my teens. He is a massive reason why I'm so disciplined, because he gave me a loving environment to be able to cultivate those feelings. So I don't want people to be pushed into a world where they disregard the many incredible things that men do for the community and have done for the world. Like we should be celebrating that. That's why I'm willing to talk to anyone, to be anywhere, and try and blend the worlds and celebrate that, because a lot of women want to too. They literally do. My girlfriend does. Like my people around me, they want to champion that shit because they're, yes, there are some fucking awful people on the planet. Yes. And we can all agree on that, but I don't think that they should trickle down and end up fucking dampening the light of fantastic people in the community.
I totally agree. I found a great point of agreement at the end. The vast majority of women and men are wonderful people, kind, loving, and we're blessed to have them here. The problem is our view of both sexes is tainted because we are infatuated with a tiny minority
on the internet,
and we're looking for a little tiny keyhole.
I'm on the internet. Media. Go outside. Like they were saying, let alone the difference between typing something and saying something. That is the beauty of being around people. You get to feel that energy. Some people you're not going to like. Some people you won't get along with. But every now and again, you will. And then it will shift your worldview.
There's a great book called Factfulness by Hans Rosling.
Oh, I've heard about this.
So good. And he became famous for having this Gapminder quiz.
Okay.
And the Gapminder quiz is he went around the world, asked thousands of people, everyone from the man on the street to Nobel laureates, 12 questions, multiple choice, 3 answers. So even if you guessed every single one, you'd get 4 out of 12. And they were about, literacy rates, life expectancy, vaccinations, all the things that we talk about. And he found that the average score for a human being was 2. So you would have gotten better if you just guessed. And it was because we always went for the more negative answer. One of them was like, what % of the world is vaccinated? 20%, 60%, or 80%? And what do you think that is?
Me?
Yeah.
60%?
It's 80%.
It is 80.
So you've got it wrong.
That's right in the middle, yeah.
And he said it's because we have a overly negative view of the world, because our view of the world is shaped by individual crises and disasters and death, and we totally ignore all the normal people we walk past and all the good news.
I mean,
go outside, look at the normal people around you living boring lives, eating sandwiches on park benches.
I said this the other day about kids, man, in terms of like what I experienced growing up. I lived in Brent in London for the first 10 years of my life, where statistically, I only found this out later, had the highest crime rate in London. Could I remember that as a kid? No. I had no concept of it being a crime. My mum used to let me run down the street and we'd run around and whatever and call us in. And now, I think if you suggest that to a lot of people, specifically in London,
crazy.
They're terrified because they've seen like cherry-picked videos. I have to remind people, like, there are millions of people in this city. You're watching 3 videos.
We literally live in the lowest crime rate in UK history.
Yeah, it's like in the last 30 years.
But we don't care because someone posted a horrible video on TikTok that is outrageous and terrifying.
Do you know what else makes me scare me? That we might have to end on a sad note. But like, what makes me sad as well is the fact that because we have these disparaging, extreme views that we're engaging with every day, I see a lot. We've already spoken about the pressure put, especially on boys as teenagers, but like boys and girls, it breaks my heart, like how I get that kids can be politically engaged, but like the level of panic that I see in like Gen Z and Gen Alpha, like it makes me sad. It actually makes me sad because I remember like Rizzle Kick started a year after the financial crash. I have no memory of my mum, and we had no money, by the way. I have no, maybe that's what it was. It made no difference. But like, I had no memory of like there being adults around me freaking out, losing their houses, I can't remember. We were there rapping about drinking on the beach, and I want young people to have like, please, in this part of your life, like, have this like slightly less dramatized. I see Gen Z always saying that we're living in unprecedented times, and it's like, financially, yes.
This is why I don't want to bring the P word back, but that's where I classify the P word. I'm like, it's such a sensational, terrifying view of the world, when in fact the world is safer and more peaceful, more prosperous than ever. And it's not perfect, certainly not, but I feel like we lose sight of that when we indulge in these quite scary.
Peaceful, prosperous. I mean, we can say that in the UK. We can say that a lot of this is built off of as you know, subjugation of like south of the global south.
I mean, if we had a conversation about the developing world, I'm sure we'd struggle to find something we disagreed on.
Yeah.
But that's why I feel like we should have words specifically for them, and rather than trying to paint them with the same brush.
Yeah, I hear it.
But
anyway, to be continued.
I'll
probably message you tomorrow.
I hope so. I mean, hopefully we can we're still friends, and we can have a dialogue where we can continue to try and change people's minds.
But I'd expect you to challenge me too.
Yeah, well, that's the part of the process.
And like, you know, I get that you can get irritable sometimes, and I do find it interesting that there is this idea of like people in the gender equality space being like apprehensive of some of your work, but I think ultimately like you've done a shit ton of research, man. Like, and you've brought with this podcast, you're bringing together people who are genuinely trying to make men and boys' lives
I've had
easier.
such a diverse amount of people sit in that seat, but I had many different voices and various different political sides, and I haven't agreed with all of them, but I'm keen to listen to them nonetheless.
Which is the point of a podcast.
Yeah, and I want it to be good faith and challenging each other and leaving ourselves open to uncertainty and changing our mind.
I agree.
On that note, thank you, Jordan. Thanks for your time.
No worries, mate.